Welcome to Mile High Reefers. I'm Scott Anderson, and it's New Year's Day 2020. Now, not only is it a new year, it's a new decade, which means that every news agency and YouTube channel is putting out year-end remembrance videos. Well, that's not quite what this one is, but I was reading an article the other day about some of those pets that went viral during the teens. And guess what? It turns out most of them have died. Like Grumpy Cat and the skateboarding dog, they've all passed on. Well, it made me think, what vintage corals and fish do I have left over from when I started my channel in 2012? So here's what the tank looks like today. This is the 1st of January 2020. And here's the tank I had on December 7th, 2012. Yeah, that's pretty ugly, isn't it? At this time, I really hadn't gone through and got new rock work yet. I set this tank up on a shoestring budget, and honestly, due to some other issues I'd had in reefing before that, it was a struggle. Easily the oldest fish in this tank is my clownfish Nemo. I got Nemo in February of 2006, so near as makes no difference, this fish is 14 years old. Now, when I got Nemo, he was a little boy. He was a little baby, tank-raised fish, and now he is a she, and she's the queen of this tank. I absolutely love this fish. It's the biggest of my clownfish, it's the matriarch of the tank, and I love this fish. So yeah, a fish can really last a long time. 14 years is fantastic. Next up, swimming on top of the clam is Kooky. Kooky is another clownfish that I got right after setting up the 90-gallon, and here he is all these years later. Now let's take a minute and talk about everybody's favorite fish in this tank, and that's Rinkins the Blue Tang. I got Rinkins in the summer of 2012. So this fish is about 7 years old right now, getting close to 8. He's done really well. He's gone through ick outbreaks, tank crashes that have wiped out a lot of other fish, and he's done fantastic. He's an old fish these days. He's a little thinner than I'd like to see, but I still hope to get many good years out of Rinkins. But I think 7, almost 8 years on, I can say I successfully kept a blue tang for the long term. So in that tank, you can see we've got orange Monte, which in this tank today is more of a red. And this stuff growing right up front and the stuff growing back in the back is the same stuff, just different colors because of lighting. But I've got tons of this coral, and it's done incredibly well for me. And if you don't believe I have tons of this coral, let's go downstairs. So just to give you an idea of the size of some of these colonies down here, like this one is super rough, it just grows out down here. But look at that. Yeah, we got green bubble algae. This really is just a holding tank, but look at the size of that thing. But there's more. We've got tons of huge colonies down here. Like, look at that. That's the purple Monty, but still. We got big pieces downstairs. And then in that old video, I've got pulsing xenia in pink. As you can see, I'm struggling with the flatworms down here, just like upstairs. I can't guarantee that this is the same original colony, but I've just always had xenia, so I think it probably is. And then of course, I have a lot of Sinularia. This is spaghetti leather. It's a terrible angle to film at just because of the way my setup is. But yeah, the Sinularia is down here. I have given away so much of this coral over the year, and it just grows and thrives. The other money that I have a lot of is this plating / encrusting Monte at the back of the tank that's grown clear up to the surface. Started off as a little tiny frag, and today it grows out of control and has to be managed. It will encrust when it's on a rock, but once it runs out of room, it starts plating. Super cool Monte, love the coloring and the patterning, and it was stupid cheap and has been very hardy. Next up is my green toadstool leather. It's not really in focus because of the angle I have to film at, but we're gonna deal with it. It's not very big because this is the variety that buds off and little pieces fall off, and I just kind of have had tons over the years. So this species doesn't get very big, but it is a great propagator. Next up is my little green Duncan colony that used to live right here. I'm showing you old video because I took it downstairs and it's a lot easier just to show the old video. But it's done really well. It's one of the tightly packed heads, so a little harder to frag, not as nice looking as the long stem, bright green stem ones, but still a legacy coral that I've kept for years. And of the vintage life in this tank, I saved the best for last, and that's this Squamosa Clam. When I got it, it was maybe 3/4 of an inch. 7.5 years later, if you were to measure from mantle to mantle, I bet this thing is at least a foot in length. It's a massive clam. My clowns live in it. It's got coral and algae living on it. It's its own little reef unto itself. It's huge, and it has gone through every single tank crash that this has happened to. I've had heaters fail on, I've had the tank temperature go to 96 degrees. I've had just massive problems over the last 7 years. This clam has taken it without a problem. When my Tang ate its siphon off, it grew back. This clam has been super hardy. When I first started keeping reef tanks, I was afraid of clams because they had a reputation for being hard. This one makes me think they can be incredibly easy, and I definitely recommend them to new hobbyists. That was pretty cool. So we're looking at December 7th, 2012 for that video. But what about the 210? I set that up in 2014. What coral are left over from when I originally set up the 210? Let's compare some of the coral in the video from October 13th, 2014, and let's see what coral I have left over from then. First up are these green Pallies. Now, I've had these for quite a long time. They spent a lot of time in a really shaded area, and they've really just gone through it without a problem. They didn't grow very fast, they didn't have great color, but they survived. Now they're in bright light and looking amazing, other than those stupid flatworms, which I'll probably never get rid of. But I love these Pallies. They're not spreaders, they're not gonna take over your tank, so they're better than most Pallies out there. And let's face it, big fat-headed Pallies are cool. Next up are the Teal Pallies. These have been in here and I wish they weren't. They're the bane of my existence. These are the fast-growing, take over everything Pallies, and they need to go away. Big coral tend to be old coral, and this is maybe the biggest coral in the tank. This is a big green toadstool leather. As you can see from the old photos, it started off relatively small. It was still a 3 or 4 inch coral when I got it, but today it is absolutely massive. It's grown onto the back wall, so I can't even really cut it up without doing major damage to the coral, so I just let it grow. I'm also personally a fan of big grown out reef tanks. I am just not the little frag collector coral guy. I like big grown out corals, and I like my reef tank to look like a reef. Now let's talk about this purple brain. This coral is really weird because when I bought it as a Platy Jireh. And it came in and it looked very Platy Jireh. It wasn't quite like your standard Platy Jireh, but it definitely had the worm brain look to it. Well, the center of it died off, and I thought I was going to lose the entire coral. And you can see that in the old video where the center's just dead. And for whatever reason, the deterioration stopped, and it took years for this coral to grow back. In fact, this coral lived in the frag tank for many years. Well, once it looked good, I put it back in the tank, and these days, it looks much more Philia than it ever looked Platy Jireh. So, is this a Philia? Is it a Platy? What is it? I have no idea, but it's a gorgeous purple brain that I almost lost years ago, and today it looks amazing. Now on to my big green dome brain. I bought this for my birthday in like 2013, 2014, somewhere around there. And it's a really cool coral. It's been a really slow growing coral, but it is absolutely beautiful and has been really easy to take care of. You can see down here at the base of it, this used to all be covered in brain. Well, as it's grown up, the base has kind of died off and it's just kind of grown high. It hasn't grown out, just up. And the reason this base kind of dies off is for lighting reasons. It's real easy to light the top and the sides, but you can't really get lighting down here. I could take a saw to it and cut this back, but as it is right now with everything around it, having that extra height actually helps me here. It keeps the healthy tissue part of the coral away from its neighbors. Now on to one of the uglier corals in this tank, and that's this devil's hand. I actually love this coral, but it's super ugly because of where it's at. It's grown onto this piece of base rock, so I have no easy way to get it off of there. I've got it completely shadowed out by everything above it. So it's really ugly because it's in the wrong conditions. It's in low light, low flow, when this coral would love high light, high flow. I got no way to give it to it, and really for a brownish leather, I just can't devote that much space to it. So super cool coral that lives in a very non-productive environment. As far as the Philia in this tank, it's really hard to know which ones are some of the originals. But I do know that this purple and green frog spawn is that little tiny one you see in the picture. Basically, it goes from here all the way up to here. I've cut pieces off, I've given pieces away, I've sold pieces off. This one has been a great grower, super hardy. It's gone through the tank crashes. I love this coral. Now let's talk about my favorite coral in this tank, and that's this green bubble coral. This bubble coral is one that I've had for a long time. I got it as a relatively small one, which you can see in the old video, and it has grown over the years. The skeleton on this is still relatively small compared to the size of this coral. But this coral over the last 6 years or so has grown to immense size. And as I'm shooting this thing's not even fully open. It will engulf this entire section of the tank. It'll go from basically the edge here all the way over to here. And I'll see if I can find some video of it really open and full. But it's a huge coral. It's opened up, but really it's not a fragger, and it's a coral that you just got to be able to provide a lot of space to when it gets old, because there's really no good way to control its space. Now, this is an Indo coral. So right now, one like this is really tough to get. There are some illegal ones coming into the country, and I would not touch one of those with a 10-foot pole. And then there's some really cool Aussie stuff, but they're a different coral. So if you're looking for one of these, it's going to be a tough get because you're looking for an older Indo coral. But that's where you get the super bright green, you get the densely packed polyps, not the branching style, and you get the massive size, hardiness, everything. This is an amazing coral that I absolutely love. That was a pretty cool trip down memory lane. As you can see, I've got a lot of fish and coral that I've owned for a really long time. And that's one thing I love about the reef hobby. Things like coral can go on indefinitely. They don't really have an old age lifespan. They're colonial animals, they grow, they spread, they can be cut, they can be shared. Unlike a vertebrate animal like a fish, a coral can go on for generations. So, thanks for watching this episode of Mile High Reefers. Like, comment, subscribe, and in the comments column, tell me what the oldest coral is you're keeping.